Hi, boys and girls. I hope you are doing well, and I hope you're enjoying the holiday weekend. Easter is one of the best holidays we have, and one of the most important days we have as Christians. But I want to ask you a question. What do you think about when you hear Easter? Well, maybe you hear of chocolate bunnies. We all like to eat chocolate bunnies at Easter time. Or maybe you think of something fun, like a fun activity like coloring Easter eggs or going on an Easter egg hunt and looking to see what types of toys and prizes and candies you can find. Well, I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you probably think Easter has something to do with Jesus. And you would be exactly correct to assume that. And this morning, we're going to look at 5 different questions about Easter. Well, the first one we're going to look at is, how did Jesus die? Easter, we think of the celebration of Jesus' resurrection when he came back to life, but we have to understand how he died before we can understand how he came back to life. Well, one evening, Jesus was eating dinner with his best friends. And after dinner with his best friends, he went with his friends into a garden. Well, Jesus was very seriously praying to God the Father, but his friends were goofing off. Sometimes they were playing around and they weren't paying attention. Other times they were fast asleep. Jesus said, "Please pray with me, guys. Please don't sleep. I'm about to do something very difficult, and I need you to pray with me." Well, his friends didn't pray. They just goofed off or slept. Well, after Jesus had been praying for quite some time, some soldiers came to take Jesus away. All of his friends didn't know what to do. They're like, "Wait, why are they going to take Jesus away?" Some of the disciples tried to fight off these soldiers. Others disciples just ran away in fear. But eventually, do you know what happened? Everybody ran away. Jesus was completely alone with the soldiers. They came and they bound him by his hands and they led him before a court. This court would try to ask Jesus questions. And whenever Jesus would give an answer that they didn't like, do you know what they would do to him? Well, they would haul off and pow, they would punch him as hard as he could. That sometimes they would pull his beard hair, which I can tell you is quite painful if you don't have a beard. It would be like pulling the hair off of your head. Well, some of the people made fun of Jesus and they even spit at Jesus's face. Well, after this one court, they took Jesus to another court. And at this court, the same type of thing was going on. People were making fun of him, people were hitting Jesus, and they even came up with this great big whip. Now, this whip had many different tails on it, as you can see here, many different whips, and they would strike Jesus over and over and over again with this whip. Now, you can see at the end of the whip, there were little pieces where they would put maybe little bits of metal or bone or wood, and that would just wham, hit Jesus and really hurt him very badly. Well, after the court beat Jesus, they took this crown of thorns and they crammed it onto his head. They took a big rod and whack, whack, whack. They hit the crown of thorns onto Jesus's head. Well, the people were still angry with Jesus and they wanted Jesus to die. So the court condemned Jesus and said that he had to die on a cross. They gave him a cross that he could barely carry. Up on his shoulder, all of his friends had left him. He's sore, he's bleeding, and he's marching up a hill with this cross. Well, Jesus was too weak at this point to carry his cross. He had to get somebody to come and help him carry his cross up the hill just so he could die. Well, whenever Jesus got up to the cross, he was murdered between 2 criminals. And here Jesus was. One of the criminals made fun of Jesus, calling him all sorts of names and saying, "Why don't you save yourself and save me with you?" Well, the other criminals said, "Don't you realize we are sinners? But Jesus has done nothing wrong. You and I, yeah, we deserve to die, but not Jesus. Jesus deserves to live." So this criminal asked Jesus for forgiveness. And of course, Jesus granted this one forgiveness because he asked. Well, there were all sorts of people around Jesus. There were soldiers, and these soldiers did not like Jesus. In fact, they took Jesus's clothes away from him, and they really liked it, but they didn't know who was going to get Jesus's clothing. So the disciples took out some games like dice, and they were making bets and gambling to see who would get Jesus's clothing. Well, at the worst moment on the cross, everything went black. There was nothing. People couldn't see. It wasn't just that Jesus was suffering physical pain or being made fun of by his friends or the Roman soldiers. No, the whole wrath of God the Father, all of God's anger was poured out on Jesus Christ. And when that happened, not even the sun could shine. Jesus went through the most excruciating pain possible, and then he died. But some of the people didn't know what had happened. They had never seen the sun go black like that. They wanted to make sure Jesus was dead. So one of the Roman soldiers took his spear and he thrust it up through the ribs into Jesus's heart. Whenever the centurion pulled the spear out of Jesus's side, blood and water poured out from Jesus. He was dead. Well, that is how Jesus died. It was quite a gruesome death, a horrific death. But now we want to look at the question, what happened after Jesus died? What happens after his death? Well, after Jesus' death, one of his friends, Joseph of Arimathea, wanted to take care of Jesus' body. So he got his servants to come gather around Jesus and to wrap Jesus up into a special cloth and put Jesus in a very special tomb, a tomb that was cut out of a rock that nobody had ever used before. Well, Jesus's friends were quite happy that Jesus at least got to go into this tomb, but the angry people were not happy. These are the same people who sent the soldiers to go and arrest Jesus. They were not happy that Jesus had his own tomb because he thought maybe somebody's going to come and steal Jesus and try to say, oh, he's come back to life. So they go before this judge Pilate and they ask for all of these soldiers to come and guard the tomb. Well, these soldiers had great big spears, they had great big muscles, and here they were guarding the tomb. But 2 days later, a girl named Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. She woke up early on Sunday morning and she went to the tomb and she saw that the soldiers had left and the tomb rock was open. This was a huge rock and not just anybody could open it. She thought, what has gone on? Maybe they've taken Jesus away. So Mary Magdalene, she ran and she got her friends and she said, come with me, come and see what had happened. Well, she brings Peter and John. Peter and John come and they take a look. They see in the tomb that there's this special cloth that Jesus was wrapped up in, but there was no Jesus. Peter and John scratched their head and they thought, well, we don't know what happened. Maybe they took Jesus or maybe he came back to life. They didn't know what to think. Well, Peter and John ended up leaving the tomb, but Mary Magdalene, she stayed there, and Mary began to weep. She thought somebody had stolen Jesus's body. She just wanted to come as a memorial. Maybe when our grandma dies, we go and we take flowers at her tombstone. Well, Mary wanted to come and do the same for Jesus. She wanted to leave something nice. She wanted to leave some spices in honor of Jesus's death. Well, while Mary was crying, 2 angels appeared and said, Mary, you don't need to be crying. Jesus has been resurrected. Well, Mary couldn't understand. She kept crying, and then somebody else appeared. Mary thought that it was a gardener that was taking care of the bushes and the flowers in the garden, and she began to talk to the gardener. She said, oh, gardener, if you have taken Jesus, please tell me where you put Jesus, and I will gladly go and get him. Well, Mary was by the tomb, and she was weeping. But then the gardener began to speak, and she realized that the gardener was not just a gardener. The gardener was Jesus Christ himself. He had come back to life, and as soon as Jesus said her name, Mary, why, Mary Magdalene recognized the voice and knew exactly who it was. It was Jesus Christ. Mary was so excited. She tried to give Jesus a hug, but Jesus said, not yet, not yet. Go and tell other people that I have come back to life before you give me a hug. So Mary ran back and she began to tell all of Jesus's friends. She told John and she told Peter and Andrew and everybody else, Jesus is alive. And then in the middle of Mary's talk, whoa, a great bright light shone and there was Jesus behind the light. All of the disciples covered their eyes in fear. They fell to the ground and they worshiped. But some of the disciples didn't know what to think. They didn't know if they could believe. Was this really Jesus? Did he really come back to life? And Jesus held out his hand and showed them the wounds. He lifted up his shirt and he showed them where the spear had gone into his side. And all of his disciples believed that Jesus Christ had come back from the dead. Well, we've seen how Jesus died. We saw what happened after he died, that he came back to life. Now, I want to talk just for a moment about these other three questions. Now, where is Jesus now? We know that he came back to life, but does that mean that he died the next day, or maybe he lived another 10 years and then died after that? Well, no, that's not what we know to be the case. That's not what Christians believe. We believe that Jesus went up never to die again, and now he has a throne that he sits on. But it's not a throne like the chair that I'm sitting on or the chair that you study on. No, it is a throne that is in heaven, and it is high above the earth. And Jesus rules and reigns over all things because he is king of the universe. The Bible says that Jesus has all power. There is nothing that is too strong for Jesus Christ. Death is something that we all have to face one day. All of us are going to die. And Jesus Christ died, but guess what? Jesus lives again. So he has all power, and he also has all authority. He is the great king, and there's nobody higher above him. So he rules and he reigns over all things. But we need to look at the question, why did Jesus die on the cross? Well, I want to look at part of a verse. So this is Isaiah 53:5, verse A. And we're going to look at part B, the second half of this verse, in just a minute. This verse says, but the servant, meaning Jesus, was pierced. So remember, we said that he was pierced in his side. And why was he pierced? Well, because we, meaning me and you, or you and I, we had sinned. So because we had sinned, Jesus was punished. He was crushed. Remember how he could barely carry the cross and he had to have somebody help him because it was too heavy? Well, he was crushed because we had done what was evil, meaning you and I, we're the ones that have done evil things. We've done bad things, we've sinned, but Jesus never did any of those bad, evil sins. So Jesus died for us. He took the punishment that we deserved. So that is why he died on the cross, but why did he rise again? So now we look at the second part of this verse, Isaiah 53:5b. Well, it says he, meaning Jesus, he was punished. Remember, he was punished with this whip to make us whole again. You see, we were broken. Remember the story of Humpty Dumpty, how Humpty fell off of the wall and he broke into 1,000 pieces. Well, that's like you and I, whenever we sin, we are broken into 1,000 pieces. Well, Jesus comes and he takes us and he puts us back together. He makes us whole again because Jesus, he was perfect. He never needed to be broken. He never sinned, but he was broken for us. He died for us so that we could come back together. Remember how he held out his hand? Well, this verse says that his wounds have healed us. He is our healer. He is the one that comes and heals us. So because Jesus was injured, we can have healing. You see, it's not only that Jesus has a resurrected life, that's the promise he gives to his followers, to his friends, that we can have a resurrected life as well. So on Easter, we look to the tomb. At the empty tomb, we realize that Jesus Christ conquered death. And he came back and has new life, but it's not just for him. It's a life that he gladly gives to us. We can share in that new life as well. So boys and girls, I want to recap our 5 questions. How did Jesus die? Well, Jesus died on a cross. He was betrayed and left alone by his friends. He was mocked. He was punched in the face. He was spat upon. He was beaten, and he died utterly alone. Question number 2, what happened after he died? Well, he came back to life. He had a resurrected and a new body. And where is Jesus right now? Well, he never died again. He went to heaven, and he is ruling and reigning. We have a human being, somebody like me and you, ruling and reigning in heaven over all things. And the last two questions, why did he die on the cross? And why did he rise again? Well, he did it so that we could have newness of life, so that we could be forgiven of our sins, and one day we will have a glorified body just like his. So one of the great Easter verses that we will look at, Isaiah 53:5, the whole verse this time. But the servant, who is Jesus, was pierced because we had sinned. He was crushed because we had done what was evil. He was punished to make us whole again. His wounds have healed us. Well, boys and girls, I hope you have a great Easter. I hope you get to eat all of the chocolate bunnies that your hearts desire, and I hope you get to paint all of the Easter eggs that you want to. But above all, I hope that you will remember that Jesus Christ died for you, that he came back to life for you, and he is ruling and reigning as king for you. And one day, he's going to give you a glorified body just like his, and you are going to be able to rule and reign with him. See you later.